Hello, this is Bad Vibes. Today's stories are all about Uber and delivery services like Uber Eats and pizza delivery. Please hit that like button if you enjoy and sit back and relax. I'm a female, 23. A few weeks ago, my friend, 24, female, and I planned to go to an event together. Since we only had free time after work, we decided to get an Uber so it wouldn't take long to arrive and we could enjoy more. The first half of the ride was really normal. Seemed like a normal, polite dude. But as soon as we got to the highway, his attitude changed. He seemed a lot more irritated. My friend and I didn't pay much attention to it though, and just kept chatting between us. Our attention was drawn when he started shouting with another driver. He turned to us and said that he was going to pull over. I tried objecting, but he ignored and pulled over anyway. He reached out for the glove compartment and pulled a gun. Important note, guns are illegal in my country. We were watching this unfold while holding our breaths, and when the other guy drove away, we let out a sigh of relief. But then we realized we were still stuck in the car with this crazy man with a gun. After that, he went back to driving and apologized to us, saying that the guy was tailgating him. I let out a, "Oh, got it." He kept talking. "That guy is lucky you two girls are here, or else I would have followed him and shot him in the face. Sleazy idiot." I look over to my friend. She is shocked and paralyzed. I'm in shock too, but trying to keep my cool. The last thing I want is him to get annoyed at us. If he was willing to shoot a guy for tailgating, I don't know what he would have done to us if I said anything wrong. "No, it's okay, I understand," I say, trying to appease him. "This guy needs to be taught a lesson," he continued. Well, I just agreed with my head. "I did that before, you know. You just trap the guy in an empty street, and when he leaves his car, bang." Did he just admit to murder? Was the only thing running through my mind, but I managed to keep calm and just agreed with him for the rest of the way. He did deliver us to the right place with no more incidents. I waited a few weeks to report since he had my home address and it wouldn't be hard for him to figure out who reported him. Nobody has shown up to my house with a gun, at least as of now. An Uber has answered my report saying that they started an investigation. I hope this guy doesn't do this to anyone else. Okay, so I know this was completely and utterly avoidable on my part, but thought I would share anyways. It was 2 a.m. and I had been drinking at a bar with friends. I was drunk but relatively functional and decided to call Lyft home. Somehow, mid my Lyft ride, my Lyft was cancelled by me apparently, but I didn't purposely do this. I told him I didn't mean to cancel and asked the guy if I could stay in the car and reorder the Lyft. He told me that I couldn't do that and then had me get out of the car. Immediately after I left the car, my phone died, so I was stranded in downtown LA after 2 a.m. I decided to just walk until I found someplace open. Which of course, literally nothing was open. Then I noticed a guy following me, and then I walked faster. He started calling out to me in a more aggressive way, and was walking faster. I eventually ran, as he chased me, till I saw a car that was on and knocked on their window, and luckily they let me in the car. I was sitting there in silence, in the stranger's car, sniffling and crying for 10 minutes in complete silence, until my phone charged enough and last until a new Lyft got there. I've had worse things happen to me in LA, but this was definitely the scary situation that could have ended horrifically if I hadn't found a kind stranger. This happened to me last year. I got a receptionist job at a clinic in my city, but the training was at a branch in another city, about 40 minutes away. My boss would call an Uber every day in the morning for me, and at night for me to come back. The point of departure and arrival was at the clinic in my city. Sometimes I went alone, and other times Other girls from other sectors also went with me to the training. The training lasted a month, and as it was through the Uber app, there were 2 different drivers a day. Most of the drivers were calm, so sometimes I would feel comfortable after finishing the trip at the clinic to ask to pay extra for them to bring me home, since I would arrive late at night. The clinic was not close to my house, and it was dangerous out there in the streets. One night, returning to my city, me, another girl, and the Uber driver talked a lot during the trip. Sometimes he would make flirty comments to me and the other girl, but as she was laughing and finding it all so funny, I didn't pay too much attention to it at the moment. When we arrived at the clinic, I asked if I could pay extra for a ride to my house, as usual, and he agreed. The other girl got out and he ended the trip, which was recorded. From then on, his entire demeanor changed. I think he felt safe doing this as he had ended the ride on his app, so nothing he said would be recorded. While I dictated the way to my house, he released several comments like, "Do you think you've had enough time to decide if it's safe for me to drive you to your house? You don't know me. I've already finished the trip and nobody knows you're still here. What if I'm a psychopath? I have to be triple your size. I could pin you down and do whatever I want to you in this car, and you wouldn't even be able to fight back. Can you imagine?" By this time, I was already in panic. I didn't know how to answer, and I could barely tell him the way to my house. After that, he laughed in my face and said, "But I'm not, and you're very, very lucky that I don't know the city, so I don't know any alley that I could walk into. By the way, where can I get a coffee after taking you home? I'm starving." He would blurt out disturbing comments, then laugh, and occasionally change the subject. It was the most tense trip I've ever had, and when he stopped in front of my house, I was so nervous that I couldn't find the money in my bag. And then he said, "If you don't have money, there's other ways you can pay for it that I wouldn't mind." I didn't even wait for the change and got out of the car, and to this day I panic when I remember, because I know he knows where I live. As soon as I got in the house, I was able to think rationally. I realized I should have asked him to stop the car and run, but I was so terrified by his comments and his tone of voice that I couldn't even think at the time. I was debating on posting this here, but the more I think about it, the more unsettled I feel. There is this bar down the road from me where I sometimes go after work to have a much needed drink. The other day when my car was in the shop and I was in the mood to chill at a bar and eat some greasy food, I texted my friend and asked if she wanted to go with me. She said yes and offered me a ride. However, she had an obligation she needed to get to and couldn't stay long. I told her it was fine. I would call myself a cheap Uber to get home. As soon as my friend leaves the bar, this man, bald, tall, skinny, mid-60s, comes over and immediately takes her seat. At this point, I'm waiting on my order and was actively searching for an Uber. I was having a difficult time finding one, and he had been watching my frustration because he asked, "Can't find a ride?" To which I replied, "I'm trying to find an Uber. It's just taking a while." "Do you live close? I'll take you." "No thank you. I'll wait for my Uber." Minutes later, he tells me he found me a Lyft and they'll be here in 4 minutes. I tell him I'm going to find my own Uber, but thank you. 5 minutes passed and I feel his eyes burning into me. He receives a phone call and it's the Lyft driver. He lets me know that they are there and if I'm still interested and want a ride. At that point, I'm out the door. I did find an Uber shortly after while waiting on the sidewalk and didn't think much about the interaction, as I was just happy to be home. But the more I think about it, this man was so adamant about me getting in the Lyft, he didn't even know where I was going. What was the destination for that ride? I'm thinking the inner feeling that told me not to accept the ride from that man. So me and my boyfriend like going dancing on the weekend, which always ends with us stumbling to our favorite pizza place before joining a taxi queue. We've done this most weekends for over a year now, so have become somewhat friendly with the guy that owns that pizzeria. and always make a big fuss over us and offer us discount every time. Now here's where it gets freaky. Last night, a Sunday night, at 11 p.m., my boyfriend and I were both in bed because we both had to work in the morning. My phone started ringing, which was weird for that time of the night, and I saw it was an unknown number, so I ignored it. Next thing we know, there's someone knocking on our front door. All the lights in the house were off, so it was clearly that we were in bed, or not in. I had another call from the same number, and then the person knocking started hammering on the door and flicking the letterbox. My boyfriend got up to answer it, even though I was a bit shaken up, and warned him not to. If I had been alone in the house, I would have never answered. So he goes downstairs to answer the door, and lo and behold, it's one of the guys from the pizzeria holding 2 freshly cooked pizzas that we didn't order. He said not to tell the other guys at the shop, but he just wanted to gift them to us, his favorite customers. My boyfriend took them from him and thanked him, but we couldn't go back to sleep for hours. We just felt so odd about it. We've ordered from there once for takeaway, so that's clearly how I got our address and my phone number. But it's still weird, right? I worked in restaurants for almost 10 years, and I'm accustomed to getting out late. One night I was finishing a double shift at a ramen spot. I had my usual beer and decided to Uber home. My Uber arrived, checked the plate and all, and the gentleman confirmed my name. I spent half of the ride almost dozing off. As the ride progressed, I noticed the driver kept staring at me through the mirror. Never said a single word, no expression, just a blank stare. I figured exhaustion and the beer had gotten the best of me, and he was probably just staring because he thought I was drunk. Later on, I also noticed he had taken a different highway, and we were making our way through Rikers Island. It was a route I wasn't accustomed to, but he had his navigation open, and I figured he was trying to take some sort of shortcut. We kept getting further into Rikers Island, and the area had become full of trees and construction machines, neon cones, and cracked cement. He came to a sudden stop. "My car just broke. Get out and call a new Uber." I was confused. There hadn't been any indication that his tire popped or it had run out of gas. I got out, and before I asked anything, he stepped on the gas and sped off. Car perfectly fine. Alone by a construction zone, I started freaking out and called another Uber. When he arrived, his first question was why I was out in the middle of nowhere, especially so late, 1 a.m. at this point. I told him about the other Uber, and he urged me to report it. I reported it and checked the profile. 4.8 stars, same license plate, but it was not the same man in the picture. The report never got anywhere, and I can't help but feel I encountered a possible murderer or rapist. Since no one's story is long enough, I'm going to include several experiences I had while delivering pizzas for a popular pizza chain a long time ago. I live in a small rural town in southeast US, and it has the usual suburban developments as well as some more outlying country rural areas. When I was younger, just as I moved out on my own, I worked as a pizza delivery guy. These are some of the creepy encounters I had during this time. One afternoon, I got a delivery order for an area of town I rarely, if ever, visited. It was on the east side of town, which was very run down and poor. An old textile mill used to employ many in the area, but had been closed for some time and had been overrun and had begun to fall apart. The houses around this area often had failing foundations and were very old. This particular order was for one of the trailer homes. I knocked and no one answered. I tried again for several minutes as I could hear music coming from inside. I figured that maybe they couldn't hear me. When they finally opened the door, it was a skinny dude with no shirt on, and he asked me to step inside. When I walked in, there was a lady behind him who was wearing a robe, and another sketchy couple standing at the back of the room. They had the boombox playing loud country music. These people were high and drunk, which I was used to, but this place was buzzing with crazy. All of them were at least 10 years older than me, and as I set the pizza down and waited for payment, they started making sexual comments about my body. Whenever one would say something, another would encourage them to continue. Eventually, the guy opened the door and walked over to me, and the lady behind him said, "Go ahead, pay the man." He handed me some cash and put his free hand on my arm, and in a hot breath full of natural light, he whispered in my ear and asked, "We were all about to have sex. You want to join us?" I said, "No thanks," and made a beeline to the door. Story 2. I got 2 orders for the same area that I mentioned before. One was a 20 pie order for a church fellowship hall, and the other was a single pie for a residence. I dropped the pies off at the church first, then headed over to the last customer. When I arrived, I immediately noticed that the house looked off-putting, dark and dirty. I was like, please let this be the wrong house. But it wasn't. There's a creepy old naked doll on the porch, and an empty birdcage hung from one of the trees inside the yard. I got out, grabbed the pizza, and slowly walked up to the house. I tried the doorbell, which was glowing, so I figured it worked. No one answered, so I tried knocking. Again, nothing. Eventually, I got creeped out, so I started walking back to my car. Halfway to my car, I heard, "Psst," and turned around to see an old man with wild, unkempt hair literally peeking his head out of the back of the house. It was getting dark out, and my patience was draining, so I was not in the mood for someone playing games. I simply said, "Did you order this pizza?" and waited for him to answer, but he ducked back out of sight. I started to just turn and leave, but then he peeked out again. I said, "Sir, is this your pizza or not?" And he finally emerges. He walks up to me carrying a shovel of all things. He said, "Yeah man, sorry, I'm just messing. Don't mean nothing by it." To which I just responded with a total and held the pizza out. Luckily that was the end of the transaction, and I was able to get the fuck out of there. I worked that same job for a few years and had plenty more weird experiences, but then moved on to find something better and safer. If you work delivering items to people at their homes, stay safe and never go inside their house. I'm a female, 19, and what I'm about to share is a chilling experience I had while using Uber. It was a regular evening, and I had decided to attend a friend's birthday party across town. Due to the late hour and being unfamiliar with the area, I opted to call an Uber to ensure a safe and convenient journey home. I requested the ride through the app, and within minutes, a car pulled out in front of me. I greeted the driver, middle-aged man, and settled into the back seat. At first, everything seemed normal. He appeared friendly, engaging in polite conversation as we navigated through the city streets. However, as we neared a secluded stretch of road, his behavior took an unsettling turn. He abruptly stopped responding to my questions and seemed to be lost in his own thoughts. An eerie silence settled over the car, broken only by the sound of the rain tapping against the window. My unease grew when he missed the turn he should have taken. I politely pointed it out, hoping to redirect him. His response, however, sent a chill down my spine. He chuckled softly and said, "Don't worry, I know a shortcut. We'll save some time." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and alarm bells were ringing in my mind. I glanced to the GPS on my phone, which showed a completely different route from the one that we were taking. Fear began to grip me, but I tried to remain composed, convincing myself that it was just a misunderstanding. As we ventured deeper into unfamiliar territory, the road became increasingly desolate. There were little to no streetlights, and a dense tree cast eerie shadows across the car. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my chest, and the shaking feeling that something was terribly wrong intensified. Then the unthinkable happened. The car suddenly came to a halt and the engine died. Panic surged through me as I realized we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, engulfed by darkness and silence. Fear literally paralyzed me. I eventually reached for my phone to call for help, but the signal was weak, almost non-existent. Sensing my distress, he turned towards me with a cold, sinister grin on his face. "Look, we have a little problem," he said, "but don't you worry, I'll take care of you." Every fiber of my being was full of terror as I realized I was trapped with this dangerous stranger. Adrenaline started surging through my veins, and I knew I had to escape. I fumbled for the door handle, desperately trying to open it, but it was locked from the inside. In that heart-stopping moment, a glimmer of hope appeared. I spotted a nearby house and saw the faint lights. Summoning all my courage, I flung open the backseat window and squeezed my way out. I ran as fast as my trembling legs could carry me. I reached the front door and pounded on it with all my might. Luckily, a kind-hearted resident opened it quickly, and we both called the police. About 10 minutes later, we heard the sound of sirens. Turns out the driver was a registered sex offender with a history of predatory behavior. My gut instincts had been right all along. This serves as a reminder to trust your gut even in seemingly ordinary situations. It's also important to remain vigilant and take the necessary precautions. As someone who frequently relies on food delivery services, I never expected that something seemingly routine as an Uber Eats order would turn into a scary experience that still haunts me. One lazy night, craving a late night snack, I decided to order some food through the Uber Eats app. It was a typical scenario, a casual dinner home alone. I selected a nearby restaurant and placed my order. The estimated delivery time flashed on my screen, assuring me that my food would arrive pretty soon. I waited patiently, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. A notification popped up. "Your delivery driver, Mark, has arrived." I grabbed my coat and hurried outside to meet Mark, expecting a quick and uneventful exchange. As I approached the curb, I noticed a dark sedan parked on the side of the road. Mark, a middle-aged man, sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. A shiver ran down my spine as I sensed something off about him. I brushed it off, and I approached the car and tapped on the window to get his attention. His expression remained unsettlingly vacant as he slowly rolled down the window. His eyes sent a chill through my entire being. Feeling a mixture of unease and hunger, I brushed off my apprehensions and went to grab my food. Mark's hand, cold and clammy, reached out, and as our fingers touched, a wave of dread washed over me, and I withdrew my hand instinctively. I tried to brush off the discomfort. I thanked him and turned to leave. However, his voice laced with an unsettling whisper, and it almost stopped me in my tracks. "Enjoy your meal," he said, his tone devoid of any sincerity. I hurried back inside. I placed my food on the kitchen counter, but my appetite had vanished. The unnerving encounter with him had unsettled me to the core, but I didn't know if I was just overreacting. Unable to shake the feeling that something was amiss, I decided to inspect my food more closely. As I unwrapped the package, the food appeared oddly disheveled, as if it had been tampered with. Realization struck me a bit like a bolt of lightning. The fear that had been gnawing at my gut was justified. Mark's eerie behavior and that he had messed with my food left me no doubt that something sinister had transpired. Did he put something in it? I immediately contacted Uber Eats customer support, sharing my experience and explaining my concerns about the food. The representative expressed deep concern and assured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly. Days later, I was informed that there had been an issue with the driver. They informed me that he had been removed from their platform, and they were working diligently to ensure the safety and quality of their services. Though I was relieved to hear that Uber Eats took immediate action, the chilling encounter left me scared. and I haven't ordered takeout since.